which is San Diego Soccer Women. These are women that come from different places around in the US. So of course we will also touch in on the situation in the US right now. But as the first thing, Brandi, you were the one that were the driver of the team, of your team, and your motto, you have it on your shirt, soccer women play for change.
Right,
and,
right.
We often talk about, you know, all these connections of us as people, how we connect in the world, playing football and wanting to see the world go in new directions. So I would love to pass on to you to go and explain to us the San Diego Soccer Women's team and how you are all connected.
Right, right. So looking back at San Diego Soccer Women as an organization, just a few years old, and my intent when I first, you know, launched the website and got onto social media with it was really about just showing women around San Diego, even locally, that there are leagues just playing, you know, weekdays, weeknights, weekends, that there are leagues for women to play in when you're over age 30. That was something that wasn't apparent to me until I was, you know, just before I turned 30, a friend had shown me, hey, there's women's leagues. I know you used to play soccer. Why are you not playing? And it was like this whole world opened up. And I realized if I didn't know about it, then tons of women wouldn't know about it. You know, they just weren't aware. The internet presence wasn't there at the time. And that actually was more like 8 or 9 years ago. And I think then pulling it over time is how much, you know, I've seen that there's a global network of women who either want to play soccer over age 30, who are trying to play soccer, there's just not an established league in their area, or there just isn't you know, enough at the level that they need in order to play either competitively or at a beginner level. And we have women playing all the way through age 80. And that's something that I think once I saw that, it became something more to me than just, okay, here's a website to find the local leagues. And once I connected with Global Goals World Cup a couple of years ago, you know, this sense of being a community of athletes at all ages was even more apparent to me. So I played in 2018, we played in the New York finals, brought a new team together for 2019. And it was really fun kind of finding this team, bringing them together. Carlene had been with us from the prior year and has gone to a couple of trips, our trip to Norway and our trip to France. And then connecting. So while I was in France, getting to know Sarah, who runs Sports Bar Project, Anna, you know, connecting with her actually through another organization that we were each part of, that we ended up meeting. Colleen running her Soccer Girl Socks organization to, you know, again, bring attention to the fact that it isn't just girls playing soccer, it's women also at recreational levels. And Kristi being connected to Colleen, each of us knows a player who wanted to play on our team, and it was kind of coming down to who was going to put the most into the movement. And, you know, in addition, of course, to being able to travel and take the time, which is another challenge, of course, with women. So we have another player, Donna, who just wasn't able to be here, but she also had gone with us to Norway and has been part of other events here in San Diego. So that's my team just kind of kicking off for where we are right now. But yeah, it's the networking, and thank goodness for social media and an internet presence to make that. But even, you know, between Colleen and Kristi, just knowing each other in person, that all of these ways are things that bring us a voice for women of all ages.
So in that, will any one of you start out with just giving us what are some of the memories that you have for playing in a Global Goals World Cup? I mean, this is both an ego thing, because I love to hear it, but I also would love other people to understand what it is that what it really means to have a team, because I think that is such a beauty thing about you. It is a strong network, but because you are a team together. And it's not just about always being a team or playing football, but it's having conversations, supporting each other in the different activities that you do in your life.
I'll go. I think that it was amazing. And one of the things about me with soccer is that I really started playing mostly after the age of 18 and really after the age of 30. And so for me and with Kristi, who I met because she organized those ladies leagues in my area, I really felt like it was everything that soccer for me has been. You know, Global Goals World Cup is these women coming together, and it's not just about playing something that we absolutely love and are passionate about, but it's also just about those connections that you make in so many other ways. And that's what Global Goals World Cup for me was. It's about making those connections that are so much more meaningful than just soccer. The encouragement that you get, the inspiration that you get from all of the women all over the world, it really shows that we are so much more connected than we think we are, even though we're thousands of miles away normally. And it was like a family, really. That was my feeling coming through my first Global Goals World Cup, for sure.
Yeah.
And just interjecting real quick that we're a family where most of us had never met each other before. Like,
right. That's what I was going to actually say.
Yeah,
me being the newest person, me being the person that kind of showed up, it really was like a late addition kind of thing. And there's always been that quality of soccer, football, that kind of makes you an ambassador in a lot of ways, just with whatever group you pop into. And I know through my experiences, unlike Colleen, I played extensively since I was about 4, and lucky to still play occasionally now when I can, although right now it's been the biggest drag ever, but not having the ability to play right now with anybody. But that's what I thought was really kind of interesting. No matter who I talked to the whole time I was at that event, and I'm kind of one of those people that strays off on my own and goes and does things and talks to random strangers, but no matter who I talked to, there was that very familiar thread that you have with almost anybody. You could pick up a conversation with almost anybody, even if you hardly spoke the same language, you were still able to really just kind of connect in a way that I think you probably can't get with any other type of activity that's out there. I mean, sport is definitely, and I feel that way about places I volunteer locally too. Sport is definitely that common connector that you can have with almost any type of diverse group out there. And it was super apparent that it was a very family feel at the event, just walking in the door. When you put the badge on, it was like, oh, okay. So everybody was quite unified. It was really nice to see.
Yeah, I'll jump on next. This is Anna. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm Anna from Boston. For me, Brandi and I connected in this other random way. Sarah and I first met in France at the World Cup prior. And unlike lots of other people, I have been a lifelong activist. I'm a later to life soccer player. I played every other sport growing up, but I just didn't hit the soccer thing, which now I realize was really a missed opportunity because soccer is this amazing global unifier, unlike other sports. So I love lots of other sports, but I will not lie. I love soccer in a different way. I have the passion. It's making me emotional, just like the pollen in the air out here right now. So for me, what was great about Global Goals World Cup that was so different is you take these huge ideas, UN level, change the world ideas. And then the beautiful part to me was, you translate that to something actionable on a local level. And then you throw in this wild, crazy soccer fun. And it's like this party event, music, people, culture. So you're unified through something really basic, the power of sport, right? You get sweaty, you're like cursing. I got kicked in the face really hard in our semifinal match. It's brutal in this awesome raw way the physicality of sport brings out in people. But then you step off the court and then, like Kristi said, you start talking to people and you realize you have all this in common. And then that, and you have the shared humanity. But then for me, you take this challenge of the Sustainable Development Goals, and I love the fact that there's an actual charge of activism. It's not enough to just show up to the event and play. Take that event and take it home and make it real and do something with it. Don't just talk about it. Don't make it social media. Don't brag to your friends like, oh, look, I got a cool water bottle. Isn't that great? It's like, okay, well, that's cool. But now what are you going to do? And I love that power of unifying sport, humanity, activism, under this huge umbrella. And it's weird because, these women are my family now. They're friends. Like Sarah and Brandi and I, we're texting all the time. And it's led to this other relationship with Sarah through the Sports Bar Project that has become a huge part of my, next level of activism. So I love everything about it. It unified everything I love in one place.
Brilliant. And Brandi, in your introduction, you mentioned that there were these different social connections and you connected through organizations or friendships. And so it's very clear that you're all activists and entrepreneurs in your own right. And And again, we'll get back to the global goals and goal 10 in a minute, but maybe you could just share a little bit about some of the organizations and the projects. So you mentioned the sports bar project, and that was another one with socks, I think I heard as well.
Yes, so maybe, and actually Carlene has Soccer Kids America, so that's an organization that works with youth. So we kind of cover it all, that not only do we have local youth organizations, we have selling, you know, socks products to adult sports, mostly women, right? Women's soccer organizations. Sarah then going international and working with women and girls around the world. And then between Kristi and Anna having local volunteer opportunities that incorporate women and girls, but obviously including boys and men in all of these advocacy organizations. So I think that's the thing that we really want to recognize. It's as much as, you know, for me, my focus when I have my social media, when I have my projects, it's really about reaching women over age 30, again, all the way up through into their 80s. But that's what I think made this team really powerful, is having the global perspective, the local perspective, the youth perspective, you know, gender across the board, that we really wanted to recognize that soccer united each of us into this team, but also the work we're doing individually and professionally brings that in. So I think Sarah maybe can talk about Sports Bar Project.
I think for me, what's been amazing is the network. We couldn't have done any of this without social media. So 20 years ago, everyone was kind of in their own little island, doing stuff in their own good work, focusing on, you know, whatever their point of emphasis was, and being able to connect with Brandi over social media before going over to Equal Playing Field and the World Cup, and then networking with Anna. And that social media connection has allowed this network to just grow and sort of support what each other is doing, because it's a huge project, getting access to sports. And, you know, for girls and women especially, but around the world, sort of you know, in line with where the global goals are, is a massive project. And no one person can take that on, but each project does their own thing and works in their own, you know, the area that they know. And for me with the Sports Bra Project, that's what's been amazing to see, that, you know, we're just talking about sports bras, but it's so much more than that. And it's just the access and using the networks, the people that know their areas, and being able to tap into that has been awesome, because each person on this group certainly brings in a different piece, and all the organizations that we work with each have a different focus. But the universal sort of piece is sort of that access to sports, and access to sports, particularly for women, for us, is huge. So that's been the fun part, and seeing how everyone does that and navigates that.
Oh, and Carlene, you're muted. Can you hear me? Carlene, you're muted.
There we go.
There you go. There you go.
Actually, I don't know if you guys can see this. Oh, there we go. See this cool little patch? It's kind of hard. There we go. Do you see that?
Yeah.
This is so cool. I wanted to share this with all of you because I don't know if you saw these when we were at Global Goals, but I got this from one of the ladies from the Saudi Arabia team that we played in the semifinals. So I think for me, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. And I think just the connections that we made was like my favorite part, you know, and just meeting people from all over the world and realizing, yeah, we have different cultures, we have different backgrounds, different beliefs. But I think soccer or football is, you know, what people call it, is something that can unite everybody. So that's the part I enjoyed the most. And with my league, I started out as calling it Soccer Kids America. We've been operating for 12 years. We're an official nonprofit for kids, but we actually started adding adults because they were saying, we want to play too. So it's really cool. We have leagues for women, futsal leagues, and also for men, and we have some co-ed leagues too. So soccer's been a passion of mine. Like Kristi, I started playing really little, probably I was like 6 or 7 though. And I'm just grateful for all of you, and I'm grateful for the Global Goals World Cup. I had an amazing time, and I'm grateful for Brandi for organizing all these amazing events and bringing us all together, because I wouldn't have met all of you if it wasn't for Brandi. So I also want to thank her for all her work and what she does.
Thank you for saying that. And listen, this is just for everyone listening in, and just for the inspiration of knowing that you can, out of just starting a team and adding people in there, and then just realize how important and how magical it can grow into a lifelong network and relationships, and in a sense also a very safe space for us to be able to talk about things. And I think especially also what we've been through such a wild last month around the world, and we have seen teams luckily benefiting from having each other, being able to have each other jump on conversations together in this time when we're not able to meet in real life, but and getting stronger when we are together, when we do have to go out and activate for things, because we need to, in a sense, be reassured, right? And so I would love to throw that and ask you into, you played for Goten. Yeah, so so talk a little bit about why you picked that goal and what are some of the things that you have been, you know, you can talk about things that you've done, you know, in according to the Global Goals World Cup, but also within your own self, what you're talking about inequalities.
I'll jump in first briefly. I think, you know, for me, like I said, I've always been an activist, and not always in sport. I do a lot of work in other areas, especially around affordable housing, economic inequalities, systemic racism and classism are things that have been always on my radar. So the last month has been really both painful and yet somewhat hopeful, depending on the day and what's happening. You know, so for me, I think Brandi's bringing together this mishmash of different people from all across the country. I mean, we were not just San Diego soccer women, that was our overall title, but obviously from other places. But what I love about Goal 10 is that, you know, it's so broad. It's almost like a catch-all. Reduced inequalities, what does that mean? So, you know, I've done activism in other ways, but coming out of the Global Goals World Cup, I said, you know what, I need to go next level. Like, it's not just enough to do things. So for me personally, I took it as a mandate to really put my money where my mouth is. And for better or for worse, I was motivated to run for public office. So I'm actually a candidate in my local school district, running explicitly on a platform of DEI programming and Title IX compliance for the women and girls, but also talking about curriculum changes. Like, what are the texts that our students are reading? Where are the non-white voices in that curriculum? What are we doing at this local level to make students feel welcome and included regardless of their background? So that's a really tangible one for me. And then I've sort of upped the ante on all the housing work that I've done, because housing is also a human right. And, you know, in America, you see it very clearly that housing and race and class are tied together. And so if you're going to talk about one problem, you have to sort of talk about the corollary problem. So really trying to work to build more inclusive, more racially diverse housing, more income diverse housing in my community, and to fight against this notion that's so powerful and I think was laid raw around the world, that we are a country, especially in the United States, that was built on white privilege. And a lot of people have been uncomfortable to say that now they're starting to get it. So I feel like for me, it's all about taking those inequalities and finding local ways to change it, being mindful of the high level things. So that's what I've done. I took the charge. I'm running for public office. I've written a whole bunch of grants. I'm giving more money away. I'm definitely giving more money away than I think I'm bringing in right now. And so I have to figure out the economics of that reality, but just trying to make it happen, but really putting myself out there and speaking publicly and using my voice to represent other people that maybe don't have as much power, and to try to share that in tangible ways for people I see every day.
If I could jump on that one, you know, at its core, the Sports Bar Project is about access and increasing access to sports so everybody has equal opportunities to play, whatever level, wherever they are. But the current climate has really kind of brought home a lot of the stuff that's at our core. You know, for the most part, it looks different in different countries, but the three biggest barriers for us are cultural, girls don't play, logistical, there's just no access to bras, and economic. And all of those are so tied up in all the issues that we're dealing with now. And access to sport, my concern is as we come out of this current environment, a lot of the programming that's in place that kind of catches particularly girls and gives them the opportunity to play may take a back seat. So for us, it's even more important now to help provide that access and help, you know, support programs that are working in areas that are addressing those three things. We know they look different in New York City than they do in parts of rural Africa, and that's okay. Each of the organizations can support in their own way, but those barriers have really just been kind of hit home with the pandemic and everything else, and kind of brought to a forefront, as it were.
Can I actually just, Lucy, can I throw this one at you? Because I mean, you're working at the FC Barça Foundation in Spain, and do you feel the same thing? Do you think that we are actually being you know, hit harder, women's football, women's sport, seen from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think at all levels, right, from the elite through to community, through to sport for development. There's the double impact, right, of COVID, and then COVID on women and girls, and then the different intersectional issues, Anna, you mentioned before. So I think from, looking at, obviously I'm in the professional football world, but also the sport for development world, and I think from a mainstream professional perspective, when we talk about the restart of sport, what the general societal assumption is that the restart of televised men's professional sport. When we moving into the sport for development side, and we are running programs in countries worldwide at Barca Foundation, but also a lot of other organizations that we're connected with. And we're seeing time and time again that the impact on coronavirus is impacting on mobility, is impacting on safety, is impacting access to health, is impacting on access to information. It's food, and so there, time and time again. So I think that what I've seen from both professional women's sport is people coming together and looking at what does recovery look like, what does the survival phase look like, what does equilibrium look like, what are the different gender edits that we need to address at many different levels, on kind of the women's football, more kind of the professional side. But then on the community development side, it's like, okay, where are the emergency funds? How are we switching our sports programs? If we were before in a field with a ball and with large groups of kids, now we're no longer able to do that. But if the kids have disproportionate and even more greater needs, then how do we adapt and be flexible and agile and able to still address the social issues that we're addressing through sports in a different way? So, in some cases moving online, in some cases moving into more humanitarian organizations. So, the organizations we're working with in countless countries, from Greece to Japan to Colombia, they're not doing what they usually do, but they're very in tune with what the needs of children and youth are, and they've been able to adapt phenomenally. Now the situation for us as we look forward is that our medium is sport or football, and physical activity in games. So what does that look like in the coming months, in the coming years even? And we've got Latin America that isn't even entering into any kind of peak with the virus, and so we're looking at not being able to do sports and festivals and activities until 2021. Here in Catalonia and Greece and Italy, European context, we're looking at how do we adapt physical activity so that in a social distancing way. So yeah, I think it's making us be very agile, be very proactive, looking very specific at project by project, country by country, what are the regulations, what are the realities, and I think for a lot of us, sport won't be the same for the foreseeable future. So yeah, I think it's quite a lot to get our heads around, but I think the strength of platforms like this is that we're just, and particularly in the women's space, is that there's incredible amounts of collaboration and empathy and understanding, and as you say, Anna, kind of spending more than is coming back in. It's driven by passion, and I think that is something that women's sport, we're so used to working with nothing, and we're so used to being resilient and resourceful. So that is not changing as we are weathering this crisis. And in fact, I think we're going to be far better off because of the way that we've had to pioneer in sport. And
there's a woman that I play with, one of my co-managers on my adult team. I help run a league much like Brandi's, not quite as cool as Brandi's. We're wannabe cool like Brandi, but a very old women's league here in Massachusetts. We talked about this opportunity as sort of an accidental, unplanned reset. There are a lot of issues that we've been struggling with. So if there ever was a silver lining, it's forcing the world to pause and think not only about the gender issues within sport as we reset and we come out. And I agree with you, Lucy, people talk about the return of sport. They're talking about the return of the Premier League. They're not talking about, you know, the sport that we all sort of love and care about in the same way. So it's a great opportunity to kind of say, wow, what can we get rid of and not just return to? Maybe we can leave some of that behind. And then maybe, Carlene, this might be a really good question for you as well, the people who do a lot of work with youth, and Sarah is a youth coach, and I'm a youth coach. There's a lot of conversation in our circles about the need for healing, especially for children, because this generation of children now especially has gone through a traumatic event, and how important it's going to be to get them back on the field, not just for their mental health, their parents' mental health, but sport is a healing opportunity. And I wonder if other people have had that thought, because we're talking about that a lot, is these kids are going to need so much social and emotional support, and sport is a beautiful way to do that. I don't know if others have thoughts, but that's something that's been on my mind as we come out of this pandemic.
I'd like to talk about reduced inequalities in general. So I don't know if somebody wants to respond first to that.
I think
Sarah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think some of the programming that's in danger is some of those low-income areas, and that's a concern to me. And the first programs dropped, and the funding, we're already seeing it within college sports as an excuse to drop programs. So you're seeing it at the college level, which for women is kind of the top for most sports, and then you're seeing it at the youth levels. And my concern is that there is funding that's going to drop, and those are going to be the first programs cut, and the pandemic's going to be blamed. I'd like to think that was different. I know we're scrambling within youth sports in general to figure out how do you do a distant training session, how do you do an individual ball skills socially distant team session. Yeah, that doesn't quite work very well. So I think those logistical pieces we're going to have to sort out. But my bigger concern is how do we make sure those programs stay protected, and how do we make sure we grow those programs and that access and increase the equality of access to sport. You know, it's a white suburban sport for girls in the US, but that's not the bulk of the population in the US. So we need to figure out how to reduce those inequalities for those populations that aren't in that demographic. So that's where my mind is. I don't have the answers. If you got a magic wand, let me know. I tried to order one from soccer.com. They didn't have one. So I'm working on that.
I think adding on to that idea, though, there is something specific about the demographic that I'm working with, and that is what's going to happen, you know, once teams are allowed back on fields. Who's going to get first access to reserve those parks and rec fields? Is it going to be the older women who come out, you know, every Saturday or Sunday? Is it going to be the boys teams? Is it going to be the girls teams, right? Is it going to be the men's leagues? And so it's interesting already. I'm wondering who's already gone to those parks and rec offices before we've gotten there to reserve these fields, because, you know, at this point they've been closed, no one's had access, but someone's getting in there to make sure that they get first use. And I think that's something to be said about, you know, the availability that in general women are caregivers in their communities, in their homes. And so, and in addition, working outside of the home in general. So when it comes to literally the amount of time needed to get out there and advocate, to get out there and be first in front, but also, you know, who's taking them seriously? Who's going to talk to the 68-year-old woman about, you know, her women's league? Who's going to put her in line first, you know, when she gets there first, compared to, you know, the 10 men who've all arrived before to talk about how their boys leagues or even their girls leagues need to get field space first. So, and it's really not about, you know, who's more important, who's better than, you know, and that's exactly the point of everything we've done, talking about injustice. But at some point, there's a sense of equity and a sense of equality that there are decision makers, and those decision makers have to stop and look at how their policies are working for things like that. And again, way more important issues happening around the world, no question, but these little things really do make a difference. They do communicate a lot to the value of what each individual and each organization really means to the community. And as far as reduced inequalities in the big picture for San Diego soccer women, for what I've been doing over the past couple of years, I like that this word has really, you know, come into the public, and that's the word amplify. So we've been talking a lot about amplifying Black voices, amplifying Black art, amplifying Black music because of recent events here in the United States. And that's a good term that I think is what I've seen myself needing to do over the past couple of years, as far as amplifying older women out on the sports stage. So, you know, bringing cameras, bringing podcasts, bringing radio shows to these fields to show other women, show men, show boys, show girls, show everyone that women can be athletes at older ages, and then that those communities can make a difference for those individual women, but also for the people around them as role models. And not only, so we talk about age, obviously, as far as an inequality, also gender. And the story's been told a million times of going into, wearing full sports gear as a woman in her 40s, 50s, or 60s, shin guards on, cleats on, and someone saying, oh, your kids play soccer? And no, I play soccer. Oh, you're a coach? No. Oh, you're a ref? No, I actually play soccer, right? Like, this is still, in this time, it's so unbelievable that an older woman would actually be geared up to play a sport that's considered competitive. It's considered dangerous by some, in the sense of having all the physical contact. So age and gender, but we also talk about gender identity, that there's still a place, for everyone, no matter what, but that doesn't seem to be the case, that people are being left out based on how they identify. Same thing with sexual preference, that there's a great representation in the United States of LGBTQIA leagues, but the integration and understanding that there's a place, whether it's on a team that's specifically for people in the population, or part of the standard leagues where there isn't that identification, either one is open, and we want to make sure that continues to be the case, and that policies, I don't know of any leagues in San Diego County that currently have policies about trans person participation, that if that's something that we're not talking about, we need to be talking about it, because otherwise the individuals are suddenly making the decisions without some kind of authority. And then from there, here in San Diego especially, we talk about immigration status, that another inequality that has to be dealt with in sports is, whether or not you're a citizen, that you're allowed out on our fields to play. And on top of that, specifically dealing with women, that parental status, we don't want to be seen as soccer moms. Not all of us are mothers, not all of us are grandmothers. And that really has to be something that again, we put away and openly talk about the fact that the soccer mom terminology doesn't identify soccer players who happen to be female. And I've had some conflicts with organizations who want to create tournaments just for moms, that you can only play if you're a mom. And that's not something that we want to represent through our organization. And then there are other inequalities, and obviously race isn't something that I had even really brought into my communication in the past, that I'm going to do a lot more of moving forward. And some of the statistics about Black Americans being able to, move through the soccer community as youth and moving into the adult soccer community, it's just such a low ratio that figuring out how to reach that population at age 30 and older is going to be my responsibility. That again, creating, actively amplifying to make sure that opportunity is open.
Brandi,
Brandi, I can kind of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Anna.
No, you go ahead. I
was going to say, as far as fields, I mean, even before this pandemic, it was always an issue, right? Like getting field space and finding fields, and we're not alone. Like, we have a mutual friend who runs a program in Brazil, and it's always been a challenge for her too, getting field space. So that's always going to be an issue. And here's the interesting thing too, they've been saying in San Diego, starting as early as next week, there's some club teams that are planning to start training with groups of 12 is what's been, I don't know if you guys have heard that and I know it's different in different parts of the world or states, but some of these club teams are starting to train with groups of 12, social distancing and, just doing conditioning and things that are like that. But if you own your own fields or you have some sort of political connection, then you can start. But like someone like me, I don't have my own facility. I rent space through the Parks and Rec department, that I'm waiting on the Parks and Rec department to open. And then once they open, you're waiting to see when you can rent, how much they're going to charge, if it's available. So I think it's just going to be an interesting time to navigate this for everybody. And it was already a problem even before the pandemic. So it'll be interesting to see how all this shakes out.
I was going to say, Brandi, you said two things that Carlene just said that really are really important to underscore. One of them is this idea that you have to get to the policymakers and the decision makers. And a lot of noise is great, but ultimately, if you get down to it, who is the person assigning the fields? Who's the person enforcing the policy? Who are the regulatory bodies that make the rules that say who can or cannot play, or who or is or is not included? And that's something I found just over my entire career, is that noise is great and noise is a starting point, but it's almost like if you think of change, this is just staying with me here. If you think of change as like a wave, right? The crest of a wave, the noise is what you see at the top, that's the foam, but the thing that makes change is all the water underneath it. It's the power of that whole wave moving forward. So I think you really have to get through, like, where are the pressure points and who has them and who are they listening to? And if you don't like the pressure points and the people making those decisions, then vote them out, make them change, you know, have a protest, have a rally, get a letter writing campaign, whatever it takes to actually make change at the point where systemic change is possible. I fully agree, like, find those people and be noisy to them. The other thing that I find really funny, I call it the commodification of mom ball, where, I don't know about where you guys are, but here mom ball has become this really cute, sanitized things. There's this great breast cancer charity awareness where they've, it's called Mom Ball, Battle for the Battle. And I think last year they raised like $35 million and $35,000, sorry, for breast cancer. And that's amazing, right? But the entire marketing was built on this premise of mom ball, which is its own kind of insult, right? Like, what about the women who aren't moms? What about the women who want to play? And I see that all over the place, that it's sanitized for moms to play sports if you call it mom sport. It's sanitized for older women to do yoga and Pilates. But same thing, when I say I still play bar league soccer and, you know, swear and kick and go out for drinks with my girls, people are like, what's wrong with you? Like, what are you doing? Grow up, that's for kids. So we have to get away from the commodification of mom ball as a general idea.
I've never heard that term ever. That is awesome. It describes it perfectly. And the number of times I'm asked, oh, who's your child on the team? I'm like, no, I'm actually the coach. And you just turn to the parent manager who's the dad. So but the term is interesting. That's a new one. That's new to me. Mom ball?
Oh, it's totally a thing. There's a whole league. The entire softball league in the town south from us is the Mom Ball League. And people think it's so very funny. And I say, oh, it's so very insulting. But
yes,
people love it.
I want to add that, you know, one thing that is important, I think, with all of this too, and I've seen it in the industry that I also work and play in skiing and snowboarding, and trying to diversify that sport, which is very much on that higher socioeconomic level, mostly white, mostly male. One of the things that is important is to integrate businesses. I think that if we have soccer businesses that we can network with, and being one myself, I think that's really important, because there's a program that Burton does for snowboarding that they've been doing for a very long time, and it's called the Chill program. And I've been involved in that. And essentially it takes inner city youth, which of course are predominantly Black or people of color and lower social economic status, and gets them out and gets them snowboarding in this case, and exposes them and gives them access to something that they may not have had. And I think part of what I look at is I look at it from that business sense, that if we can collaborate, particularly since we are talking about not just reducing inequalities of color and race, but also of different stratus of economics. And it really would help to create more change. So not only are you working with the public sector and the nonprofit sector, but you're also integrating businesses who have the ability to leverage that change as well. It's important to add that to it.
And just a question on, so obviously you guys, a lot of you are advocating and very successfully so reducing inequalities within sport and within soccer. And have you seen some good examples where those sort of positive changes in the sport have translated into, you know, small changes in society more generally? I mean, you know, where do we, you know, if we have our individual efforts, where do we put our attack? Is it to public office, society, or is it, you think there's something unique about targeting sport and you know, try to focus on the different certain inequalities within sport to try to then catalyze broader societal change?
I don't think there's one answer. I think this got to be kind of attacked on all fronts. Some of the little stuff that we've seen, we were at an event and you could tell that the guys were uncomfortable coming over. They were like directors of the club. They were uncomfortable talking about sports bras. They were the leadership of the club, but and half their club wears a sports bra, but they still couldn't talk about it. So after broaching the subject and after kind of presenting on it, having them come over and say, oh, now we get it. Now we can talk about it. I think those changes are reassuring. You know, they can't make an impact maybe globally, but can they impact their club that when they're ordering uniforms, maybe they don't order the white uniform with the red bra underneath. Maybe they actually make bras a standard piece of it. And having those things is reassuring. It's frustrating that there's so many clubs and there's only a handful that have had those conversations. But I love it when I see the guys that are in those leadership roles suddenly start to recognize half of their population might have a need they hadn't thought of, like tampons in a med kit, you know, sports bras. This is a part of, you know, should be part of your club. So for me, those are positives. You know, it's easy to get frustrated, but you try to hold on to some of those and those fun conversations that they're like, oh, we can talk about a bra. Okay, it's all right.
I think for me, similar to something Colleen just said about leveraging company resources, you know, leverage the clubs. I mean, so the league that I am a part of is the Eastern Massachusetts Women's Soccer League. It's been around since the 70s. It's a very old, very large league. And, you know, throughout the years, they've done all kinds of awesome charitable efforts. And I've recently created for myself, I guess this is something else I forgot to mention, I've created a new position. I'm calling it Outreach Director to be more broad, because I felt like the league could do more of that. But there's actually been a history of activism within the league. So that's great. But then your point about how do you make it bigger, right? Lucy, how do you take it out? So examples that they're undertaking are partnering then with other leagues. So now it's not just a women's thing, but like Sarah was saying, well, now we're partnering with the Bay State Soccer League and all of Mass Soccer. And we're going to do this big charity option, you know, looking at, there was recently a big campaign to raise money for the Greater Boston Food Bank because of COVID, right? So the leagues kind of banded together and used their platform to get the word out to get more food to the food bank. You know, it sounds really small and basic. So I think, you know, use your individual voices, figure out who else shares them, and then leverage the leagues, leverage the companies, look for those partners to make it not just so it's like one solo voice screaming into the wind. You know, we're a lot noisier together. But I think looking for those opportunities to build alliances and platforms. And if there's something that you don't, you know, I think Majken and Marie would agree with this, right? If you feel the world needs something and it's not right in front of you, well, just start it. Nobody says you need permission. You don't have to go on to something else. So, you know, you started Global Goals World Cup, right? Out of something great. And now there's this great thing. So I think don't underestimate the power of leveraging existing relationships, but also don't be afraid to just start something new, right? Sarah is a starter. Actually, I think everybody in this call is an entrepreneur of some kind or another, right? Raise your hand if you founded something new. I literally think everyone is. So that's a unifying event that I think ties people together. Don't just glom onto someone else. If you want to change something, make it happen. Like, you have the power.
And I want to add on to that I think what's important, you know, answering you, Lucy, is my role also is getting people to recognize their own importance. That going to these women and saying, you are amazing for playing soccer at age 67 and age, you know, 82 and even 32 and starting for the first time at 45, right? By giving them some belief in them, them creating that own confidence in themselves, they may talk about it more. They may then advocate for themselves, and you kind of spread that confidence. And I think that also brings about a lot more change, you know, activating others to advocate for themselves and to advocate for others. We like to see that spread. So also, is my shirt backwards, everybody? Is it?
I can see it forwards.
Okay, good. I was going to flip it in case we could at least at the end of the call.
I was just going to kind of, sorry, go ahead.
So can I battle? I mean, I would love to battle both. I mean, and Kristi, are you also working and running leagues?
So historically, I helped start one of the biggest women's leagues here in Frederick, and I've always been involved in those types of ground level things. Currently, I'm not actively involved anymore. I'm still trying to play on a couple teams, but I went through some medical issues with paralysis and other stuff that I had to kind of take a backseat. Actually, Global Goals last summer was the first time I'd actually gotten cleared to play soccer of any kind since I was paralyzed that January for a bit of time because of some disc issues. But I played roller derby and soccer my whole life, so several different sports at this point. But I'm actually involved locally with the Boys and Girls Club here in Frederick. I'm on the board of directors. That was kind of what I chose to take under my wing, like probably a year and a half ago now. Actually, when I was in the hospital bed, I did it. But what I think is so important about that, and when you guys are talking about what's happening on the individual level with the smallest of people, right? These little kids who in my club, they turn to the Boys and Girls Club basically for exposure to basically anything. Athletics is a big part of it, you know, them being able to go outside and run and play and participate in organized games and sports and things like soccer is so critical to their development. So it really kind of resonates with me when we're speaking about how this is going to affect the individual children, like every little child who that was maybe their escape from, you know, being at home and maybe not being supervised or maybe not having things. Soccer and what we provided through the clubs has kind of like been a lifeboat to a lot of people. And, you know, that resonated with me most of everything everybody said today is just like thinking about on the individual level for each kid out there, you know, and be it male or female, honestly, you know, it was already difficult for us to provide certain resources for them because of funding and field space and everything else and make it actually be an experience. But my brain is kind of spinning right now thinking about, you know, what's going to happen next when we finally resume the ability to play in groups and these kids aren't having to show up in masks and like the things that we're having to do locally. So, but yes, locally right now I'm dealing with definitely more of a smaller, more localized unit as opposed to larger groups. But
I'm curious, and that's a little bit to all of you, because I think, I mean, Anna, I think that you would have the brain and capability to map out, you know, when you talk to the field space of thinking equal terms for anyone in that, you know, whatever league it is, and then in a sense taking turns. Maybe this year somebody's doing that, and next year will be something else. And I think some of it is really just mapping it out, so you'll be able to give inspiration to those people who might be just stuck in, we used to do this, you know, we normally do this. So I think that there's such a challenge of norms, and right now we in a sense all have to challenge norms, right? And Lucy, this is for you to with this whole group. I think it is always complicated to work with big clubs and big organizations. You have a very set structure of how things, and you clubs become either the oh, it's so cool, we are connected to Barcelona, or, you know, but it doesn't guarantee anything. It's the same like, you know, us as women growing up saying, yeah, I grew up playing with the guys. I feel that was saying that I was a better player, you know. So finding the right relationship with big organizations, big clubs, and leagues that is not big in that sense, but has the huge potential of coming up with the ideas that can be used at and dare to look at as a big club. So I think that there is, I mean, for the conversation within this group, and in a way try to keep the conversation saying, and what could it really look like, instead of the way that it looked today. Where are the you know, the complications that could lead to bigger changes? Because the world wouldn't look like today if the clubs have taken a bigger responsibility of creating change. Then we would have seen a lot more people being aware of inequalities and climate and these things if clubs started speaking up about it, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I work a lot primarily with youth. I mean, we do have our adult leagues, but I think youth are the future. I mean, you're seeing it here a lot in San Diego. I'm just speaking from where I live, with, you know, the marches and making their voices heard and being aware. And I think they're the future. I think, you know, working with these kids, just to give you an example, it's so fun when the kids watch the parents playing the game right after them, and they're cheering and clapping for their parents and realizing, you know, when I grow up and when I become older, I don't have to stop playing futsal or soccer. I can continue, like Brandi says, as an older adult, whether you're a parent or not. So I think it's what we're teaching the youth. I think I'm hearing that a lot of us work with youth, is like, what are we teaching our kids? What kind of example are we setting? And let's give them tools to be the change makers too for the future. So that's kind of, you know, what I'm thinking of, like, let's empower the youth and let's empower them to also continue to make changes moving forward as well. Instead of, like you were saying, just the status quo. This is the way things have always been.
Well, I think, Majken, something I'm thinking of when you talk about the big clubs or big, sponsorship, right? Like there's a lot of pressure right now on major sponsors, especially of the federated leagues, right? Especially in the US, you're looking at Nike, you're looking at Secret, you're looking at Volkswagen, right? These companies that have huge platforms and visibility. So one of the things that I think about in terms of actual systemic change is you do have to have boots on the ground at a grassroots level. But at some point, everyone has different ways and different powers. And if it's incumbent on people in leadership positions to lead, right? That's the point of it. So, case in point, some people are busy. Maybe it's not their preference to speak out. Maybe they're shy. Maybe they're busy working 2 jobs to keep their mortgage, right? So I think it's a little bit important to remember everyone has different talents and everyone has different bandwidths to make change. But if you're going to be a Fortune 500 company or you're going to be a national federation, you have chosen to put yourself in that high level position and you have resources that people on the ground don't have. So I think if you really want to look at change, it's at every level. It's little daily interactions with people local things, state things. But I do agree with you. If leadership were to come from those sponsors and really take a stand on it, people are listening. They have followings, they have resources for advertising, they have channels of communication that an everyday person like me doesn't have. If I could be as powerful as Nike, this world would be a lot better right now, right? Come on, let's do it. But I'm not as powerful as Nike. So you have to sort of look at these companies and to me, it's about accountability. Like we personally have our own moral compass. You hold yourself accountable for your own behavior. If you've got good friends that call you out when you behave badly, well, those are friends you keep because they're willing to be honest. But on some level, we have to hold our elected officials and our corporations and our sponsors and our media providers, we have to hold them accountable because they have a bigger platform than individuals do. So for me, that's part of the social contract of activists, if there was such a thing. And that's another great thing we should coin. The social contract of activists, right? It goes both ways. Leadership and money flows down from the big ones, but we as the groundswell, back to my metaphor of the wave, right? You got to push it through from the wave. It takes out both parts working together. But I would love to see more leadership from the really rich and powerful people to take a stand, because people will follow them who maybe don't have the same resources because they're just too busy, or they're too poor, or they're oppressed, or maybe they're afraid. So let's use our voices to hold everyone else accountable too.
And I want to make that very specific to soccer, that I've had quite a bit of experience over the past couple of years, especially on social media, messaging to some of our larger organizations, some of them being soccer tournaments, private tournaments, more public tournaments, our Adult Soccer Association, some of our professional men's leagues, and using my voice to say, hey, you posted some sexist content today. I want you to understand that not only are you going to lose my following, but I'm going to repost this to make it clear that this is how you're representing women in sports, not as athletes, but as entertainment. And if you have a choice, if you're a decision maker, the person reading this message on the other end, or if you can get this message to them, I think it would be really good for you to reconsider how you're using your content on social media. And I've had pretty good luck. There are times that I get somebody back saying, you're right, we're sorry, and they pull it. They pull it from their social media. There are times that they, argue back and forth a little bit, but then I notice from then on out, there's no more sexist type, sexualized women on their content. I recently had an interaction again with an association about saying nothing, here are US Soccer, Nike as an example, all these organizations are posting very strong anti-racism messages, but then we hear silence from our adult association.
We're losing you.
Oh, my voice or my video?
I see you fine.
Can you still hear me?
I got you.
You're gone, Brandi.
Oh, now you're gone.
There we go. Okay.
There we go.
So I'll just finish that thought. I know we're almost out of time, but as far as organizations, so I don't know where you lost me.
Sorry, you were in the middle of a great moment there. But
I'll find it again. So tracing back then, so talking about seeing sexism in soccer and speaking out against that, but even just within this past week, some of our organizations not giving a voice to the anti-racism movement, which is not political. Racism is not about politics, it's about humanity. And to see that the organizations that we look to for our soccer tournaments, that we look to for our adult events, for the soccer community, that they are suddenly quiet, that's not okay. And even my voice, like I can be a wave even alone to say, hey, we see that you're choosing to not speak up about this. We see, And as much as I acknowledge, I mean, Anna has a great point. Not all of us have to speak up. Not all of us have to protest. Not all of us have to, you know, be on social media about it. Some of us have different ways. Some of us, as the movement is also saying, listen and learn, mute and listen, right? There's a lot of that can be going on. But for those who do have a voice, we can hold people accountable. We can hold organizations accountable, because when they're not following the trend of again, with this specific case, speaking out against racism in the United States, that is reflecting on their organization. Show your policies about how you treat hate speech. Show your policies about how you treat inclusion. You know, let us see what you're doing in the background if you feel proud of it. So individual voices actually, in my case, have made enough of a difference that I see how posts on social media have changed. I see how messages are coming out differently. And I think that matters.
It's an amazing conversation, and really, really beautiful to see you all in here. And I hope that we actually physically get to see each other somehow sooner than later in this world. But 100%, let's remember to stay connected and keep talking. And same with, I mean, I hope that you know that within our network, if there is connections that you can see that you would like to have, just reach out to us. And then I think that all the ideas and things that you see now in the US, if there are ways of, when you talk about healing and Black Lives Matters, and if there's any of this that we can help share and post in the Clubhouse, please share it with us, because we would love to, but you are closer to the US than, of course not Marie, but than Lucy and I are in this. But we would love to share the knowledge for all the teams that we have around the world, for them to know what's going on, and if there's ways that they can lean in and support. So thank you all for being here today. Beautiful conversations. I hope we see each other in a Global Goals World Cup around the world sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us, Lucy and Majken and Marie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Good to see everyone.
Bye.
Inspiring. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.